Hello, John. Good to see you. Hi, Flavia. Straight from Australia. How are you? Good to see you guys. Let's just wait for Sergio to join us. He's just finished the class. Hey, good to see you here. Morning. It's morning there, right? Oh, that's great.
Hey Deborah,
Hello. Oh, you're there. How are you?
good. How have you
That's
been?
great. That's great. Good to see you. We talk a
Good to
lot,
see you
but never
too.
like this, right? Never face to face. It's always just messages.
Absolutely. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Great,
It's
I can hear you
perfect.
fine too.
Yeah, we can see some people joining. That's great. So, hello, everyone. Let's get started with our live.
I can
So,
see
it's
some
a
familiar
pleasure.
faces here. Nice.
Yeah, yeah. I saw Jonas of Latvia, who was my CP tutor, and the others are probably, oh, I don't know them, but great to see you all here. It's a great pleasure.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here too.
I know you're tired. It's been a long day. You were teaching up to now, but just a little while more.
No, that's absolutely fine. I've just finished actually, but I'm good.
That's great.
Hi
Hey,
Lavinia.
John.
Hi John.
Okay. Hi, Lavinia. Good evening. Guys, I'll start with the introduction, but I'm going to do something pretty short. I'm not going to take very long. So I mean, Sergio needs no introduction, but let's go, let's follow the protocol and do it anyway. So Sergio has been teaching ever since 2002, and correct me if I'm wrong in anything, right?
Ah, sure.
He is a CELTA tutor, a Delta qualified teacher trainer, a C1, C2 proficiency tutor, and he's been working exclusively with teachers since 2017. There is something I'd like to say, if you don't mind. No, if you don't mind my breaking the protocol a little bit. I
No,
would
go
just
ahead.
I would just like to share. I did it with a student of mine the other day. She came to me through you, and then I said, not only Sergio is this great teacher, this great tutor, instructor, but you're such a kind person, such a generous person. You've been sharing so much with me and helping me so much in this transition between being a coordinator, pedagogical coordinator, and now an independent teacher. So it's been, as I said and I mentioned, and I will never stop saying, because I like being
Thank you.
thankful to everyone that supports me. So you're you're an amazing person. So I'd like to
Thank you.
make
It's a
it
pleasure.
public.
You're very
Okay.
kind. Thank you.
No, it's true. So I'd like to let people know a little bit about the things we don't normally see, right?
True. Yes. Because no, sometimes only people get to know like one side of us, right? The professional one,
Yeah,
or we don't really
just the
get to know us on a
professional.
more personal level. Yeah.
Exactly. And then we become a myth, because you were just like that to me. In the beginning, it was like
Really?
the myth. And then
Oh, not
when you
at
see it
all.
just like a people's person, just like I am, like we all are. So this is great. It's great to see that
Hmm.
and to share that. And well, for those of you, for those people who are here and are your followers, I'd like to introduce a little bit about me as well. So I've been working with teaching almost the same time as you. I started in 2003,
Hmm.
and then I fell in love with the profession. And originally, I am a bio doctor, so I didn't graduate in languages or anything, but I fell in love with the field, and then I specialized in this because I decided this was the profession I wanted to follow.
Hmm.
So I've been working as a teacher for 18 years. I was a pedagogical coordinator for 15 years. And I decided to go solo and be an independent online teacher in the middle of this year. So from July on, I started this process. And well, anyway, it's been a huge learning process, a great one.
And I guess you're enjoying it, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still figuring it out,
Mm-hmm.
like finding things out and getting around and finding my place in this new area. But yes, it's been really nice. Well, I told you already, I like challenges and I like learning.
Mm-hmm.
I've been getting a lot of it. Can't complain.
Actually, you're gonna keep getting it because once I think that once you step into working as a private teacher and you are self-employed, so then you have lots of but at the same time it's very rewarding. So
Hmm.
all the benefits that you get and all the learning, so it makes up for all the challenges that we have to overcome.
It's all in us, actually, right? The
Mm-hmm.
good and the. I mean, I wouldn't say there are like bad things, but of course there are, setbacks and things that we must work on during the
Absolutely.
way. But that's normal. That's life. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I walk in the park.
Exactly.
So let's get started. Why have I decided to talk a little bit about the CEFR when I came up with this idea and I invited you? Because this was something that always got me really curious. I wanted to know more about it and how can we classify? Because this is something that we do all the time. Every time we
Mm-hmm.
receive a new student, we have this interview and we have this talk, and then we say, oh, you are a B1, you
Mm-hmm.
are a B2, you are a C1. And then for us, this is really clear. We work with it. But what about for people out there? Is it clear for the students? And then maybe they think a B1, is it a basic one? What does it mean? So this is what I'd like to know a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And how we've been working with this and how it all works and how it's assessed. So I thought that maybe we could start telling a little bit about the CEFR and what it stands for. What do you think?
Absolutely. Uh, and I think that you've raised a very important point. And I'm frequently asked that question, especially for example when I have teachers that come to me and they say that they want to start preparing students for proficiency exams, and they don't have much experience, so something that they had never done before, so they are about to start, and there's always this doubt in the sense that, okay, so if I'm going to start preparing someone for the B2 first, so I mean that implies that I'm familiar with the B2 level
Mm-hmm.
according to the Common
Mm-hmm.
European framework, and maybe something that I can share, which it can be helpful, is even if you are a teacher that you have never prepared students for the B2 first, but if you are used to the level in the sense that if you've been teaching that level for some time, I think that to get us a start with a very practical piece of advice is look at the course book you're using. So because nowadays I would say that 99% of the course books, or most of the course books, they are aligned with the Common European framework. So even if you have never taught B2 first or C1 advanced, the exams themselves, but you are somehow familiar with the level. I mean, it's a level that you've been teaching for a while. By looking at the course and by thinking about, for example, the things that we need to teach students, and by looking at the syllabus, I think that you have
Mm-hmm.
pretty much a very good idea of what the level entails.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So normally this is my first piece of advice when it comes to how can I become more aware of what, I mean, from a teacher's perspective, of course,
Mm-hmm.
how can I become more aware from what a particular level B1, I mean, whether it's B1, C1, or C2
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
going to involve. So, I mean, consider the course book you're teaching, consider everything that it covers, have a close look at the syllabus, and you're going to find pretty much everything that students are expected to be um, producing
Mm-hmm.
by the end of the book. I think this is a very good start if you're if you're not unsure, I mean, if you're sort of unsure as to, I mean, what you can do to become more familiar with the different levels.
And this was something I was really curious, and I found out when I was preparing for our live that actually the CFR was basically created in order to, I wouldn't say regulate, but to, I don't know how to put that into not being such a very very strict, but maybe to standardize or to draw a line
Mm-hmm.
concerning syllabus. So when we are preparing a course book or when you're writing for this level or that level, what should you include? You know, what a student should be capable of doing by the end of this level or by the end of that level in order to make this more standardized throughout. Yeah, not only for English. This is something that is also curious. Not only for English, but also for other European languages. So we have it for German and we have it for French, and there is like the same. There are the same levels for other languages as well.
Yeah, and I think that's why the question arises, because when you look at the common European framework, so they're not, for example, determining what you're going to teach in terms of grammar. You're not going to find there, for example,
exactly.
you should teach this or that as far as grammar is concerned. It's focused on the communicative purpose. So you're going to use language for this and that purpose. The language, in terms of vocabulary and structure that you're going to use in order to accomplish that, it's something else. But it's more in the sense of the functions. How you're going to use the language to perform certain functions. So actually, and that's why I think that maybe a good piece of advice is, if you're not sure in terms of what it involves regarding language and vocabulary and grammar, so look at the course book you're teaching. Think about, for example, the things you're supposed to teach and students are supposed to learn. Because just by looking at the common European framework itself, it's going to show you more in terms of functions, but it's not going to give you much information in terms of language itself. And again, I'm talking about grammar and vocabulary here.
Yeah, and it's very explicit. Like, it's written that it's not supposed to be a guideline or anything. It's just basically, as we mentioned, something that will like align with in terms of materials that are being produced around. And I have a question now. Do you think that for a teacher to prepare a student for one of these exams, is it crucial that this teacher have been through the exam, him or herself? Do you think that they have to be taken all the exams, or at least one of the exams? What do you think?
I think that it would help if you've had the experience yourself. I know some teachers, for example, that by the time they started preparing students for proficiency exams or TOEFL, or not only Cambridge exams, but also TOEFL and the IELTS, they had taken the exams themselves. So they had gone through the whole experience, I mean, as students, which in a way made their lives easier because they knew exactly what to expect. I mean, it's something that they had, because I think it's important to consider that you can have like a theoretical understanding of what the exam involves, but if you haven't taken, at least, I mean, maybe not pay for you to go there and take the exam like officially, but if you haven't had the experience of sitting down and trying to take the exam to see what it's like, I think it's a huge disadvantage. Because then you're going to have this more theoretical knowledge about, okay, what the different parts and some of the strategies you can use. But have you tried like employing those strategies yourself to see if they really work or not? So when people, because this is another question that I'm frequently asked, like, I haven't taken, for example, the C1 Advanced, I have taken the IELTS, I got Band 9. So if you got Band 9, you are at C2 level. So, and now people they come to me and they want me to prepare them for the C1 Advanced. Should I take the C1 Advanced? Like, even if you don't take the exam, like you go to an exam center and take it, I would advise that, okay, you should sit down, study the exam, and maybe take one or two complete mock exams.
I was going to ask you that, because the mock test will give you this idea, right? So like you have the feeling of the timing and the strategies you need, if they will work or not. You have the language.
Yeah, so I think at least, because if you don't do that and you just keep talking about the exam in terms of what you believe it's like, and because you've read about it, and then or you've taken an exam which is similar to that, I think that you may fall into the trap of not just not walking the talk, but really, I think that most of the things that you'll be sharing are things that you haven't tried yourself.
I was going to tell you that. I think it's just like the experience, like the human experience, because I took FCE, then I took CAE, then I took CPE. So I know how I felt when I was preparing for them. And each and every time I sat for an exam, I know what I was going through at that specific moment. When the interlocutor asked me a question or showed me a picture that I couldn't make heads or tails and I had to come up with something. And then, you can share this experience with your student and say, it's going to be all right. Regarding that you are prepared, even if something like that happens, you will be all right. You have to know a strategy to come out of that and to talk your way out of that in case of the speaking part. But yeah, I think this experience is important.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that at the end of the day, you become even more empathetic in the sense that, okay, you know what your students are going through, so it's easier for you to empathize with them. I haven't taken the IELTS exam myself, like officially. I've tried some mock exams, of course, because I taught IELTS for some time. I haven't taught because now I've been focusing predominantly on Cambridge exams, C1 and C1 and C2. But I taught IELTS for some time, and it's fascinating because even though IELTS is testing reading skills, writing skills, listening skills, so the same skills are being tested, but the way they're being tested, as well as the sub-skills that are being tested, are not exactly the same when you compare, for example, to a B2 first exam. Because sometimes people kind of extrapolate. They think, okay, so if I am familiar with this exam, and this exam is testing reading skills, therefore, if I start teaching IELTS, it's going to be the exact same thing. Not really. I normally use TOEFL as an example because TOEFL tests speaking, just like other proficiency exams test speaking. But then you're going to be talking to a computer. Talking to a computer is not the same thing as talking to someone else, talking to another human being. So it's something to...
And also about some things are really different because I remember when I was to work with TOEFL as the supervisor, so I used to watch people being tested, and I've always been a huge fan of Cambridge exams, so I took all of them, like they were Cambridge, but I was able to follow the TOEFL, and what I saw people doing was completely different to the things we do in Cambridge exams. Okay, as you mentioned, the same skills, but in a completely different context. So the texts are different, the structure of the questions are different. So even though you may have the language, you still have to adapt for that specific test. That this is what we talked in our last live with John and Murilo, and they said it's not only about speaking English, it's about being ready for what's going to be asked from you, for what's going to be required from you. So, and being comfortable in that. So yes, I agree.
Definitely. Yeah, it's not just language, right? I mean, language itself. Yeah. There are other strategies that play a huge role when it comes to how successful you're going to be. Yeah. I don't know how familiar you are with the IELTS exam, but in the reading paper, there is a task that you have to read the text and decide whether the answer is in the text, not in the text, if it's right, if it's wrong, or if it's not given.
Yes, I remember something like that, but I think I remember from TOEFL, from teaching TOEFL prep or something like that. But I've seen that. It's completely different to what Cambridge requires.
Yeah, and you don't have this kind of task, for example, in Cambridge exams. So, and it seems kind of silly because, okay, all right, so it's slightly different from what you have in Cambridge exams. But in terms of strategies, it can be incredibly challenging for students to read a text and say, okay, is it not given or is it wrong? And at first, they're always in doubt whether it's wrong or so. You have to help them look for clues and evidence in the text, whether it's going to show them if it's incorrect or not given.
Because it's not obvious, right? It's an exam. It's not obvious, so they have to develop techniques in order to better approach each task. I totally agree with you. And And when we talk about different exams, you mentioned that now you work mainly with Cambridge exams. Are they the most recurrent? I mean, the highest volume of exams that we work with or that people look for are Cambridge, or what do you say?
Well, in my experience working with teachers, yes, but I have some friends, for example, who teach like most of their lessons are focused on preparing students for the TOEFL exam.
Because you work with teachers, right? So then teachers,
yeah.
I think, particularly focus on Cambridge. And then, of course, it all depends on the objective of the person, the goal, if the person is going to study abroad. And now, getting into this subject, which would be the main differences? Like, okay, when should I take TOEFL, or when should I take Cambridge exams, or, you know?
That's a good question. If you think about teachers, I would say that most of them are going to go for Cambridge exams, especially C1 Advanced and C2 Proficiency, because at the end of the day, this is what most schools apparently require. They demand from teachers a C1 or C2 Advanced level of proficiency. And when you go for Cambridge, I mean, you know exactly the level you're going for, right? No surprises. So if it's C1, you know that your English is going to be cast at C1 level, and if it's C2, the same. When you think about an exam such as the TOEFL or the IELTS, they're multi-level. So you can take the exam, and the same exam, for example, you can get a score which will correspond to A2, B1, C1, C2. So in my experience, most of the people that are going to look for TOEFL or IELTS are people that want to get into a university. So especially an American one, or some university North America. So because most universities accept TOEFL, so they will be going for TOEFL for this particular reason, or IELTS because they're going to like move to another country, and IELTS is one of the requirements. So normally that people who take multi-level exams that are not going for like what specific one, it's for these two main reasons: moving abroad or trying to get into a university.
And at the end of the day, would you say, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
but go ahead.
Would you say that this kind of multi-level exam, would it be more of an advantage or a disadvantage? Because, okay, you have no fail, right? You will be leveled according to how well you perform in that exam. So what do you think of that? Do you think it's more of an advantage or a disadvantage concerning?
I think it will depend on your context. If you're trying to get into an American university, let's say, and then they require a score like something like 300, 400, 500 points, or something above that. Well, you know the score you need, right? So you're going to be taking the exam, and even though it's different from taking a CA exam that you can get a grade A, B, C, or you may even fail, you're taking something that you have like a range that is expected. So I don't know. I feel that it's more psychological. It seems that when people take a multi-level exam, since they know that they're not going to get, for example, like you take CAE and then you get B2 level. I mean, you have failed, right? Because that's not what we're expecting.
Well, yeah, that specific level. Yes, you have failed that specific level.
Yeah, even though nowadays Cambridge doesn't give you like a certificate, but you still get something, right?
You do. You get it, and it looks very much like a certificate, because you have the holographic thing and yes. Yeah.
But people are frequently frustrated because they get that. So that's not what I went for. I went for a C1, and then I ended up getting a B2. But you still get
but
something.
It's better than nothing. Because
Absolutely.
when I got mine, if I had failed, I would get nothing. If I had gotten like below 140, I don't remember right now.
I remember those days.
Yeah, that would be nothing. And I got like, if I had got like, if it was like today, because I got A, then I would have gotten C1 level when I took my B2 first. And I would have gotten a C2 level when I got my CAE.
That's a plus. Yes.
But that wasn't the case. I had to pay for every and each one of them.
Yes, you didn't get. Yeah, I remember that. So you would either get the certificate or you didn't get anything at all. But nowadays you still get something. But anyways, there seems to be that when you take a multi-level exam, you have this. Maybe it's like a psychological but since you know that you're not going to get, and even though you can fail, right? I mean, that's not out of question, because if you're going for a specific score and you don't get it, so technically you have failed.
Yeah, true.
I mean, you're gonna have to try that again.
You don't fail the exam itself, but the exam you took is not enough to achieve your goal. Yeah.
Definitely. But yeah, I think it's a question of purpose, really. I mean, why you're taking that particular exam and what exactly you need. I don't think that most people are just taking the exam to say, okay, let's see how, I'm going to take this exam for fun and let's see.
Too expensive for that, right?
Yes, they're kind of pricey. So there's always a purpose, right? You're always looking for a specific score or a specific grade. So yeah, in one way or another, there's always some kind of pressure.
And something else that I'd like to talk about here, that many students ask me, like, does it expire? And when it comes to Cambridge, I say no. It's like it doesn't have an expiration date. It's like a lifelong grade. Let's say a lifelong certificate. And then TOEFL has this expiration date every 2 years. I think it's still every 2 years that you have to take it again too. So what about this? How do you feel about it?
As you said, technically you take a Cambridge exam and there isn't like a deadline or it's going to expire after 2 years. What I've seen is, depending on what you're applying for, whether it's a university or a job, if you have, let's say you took yours 4 years ago, so they may ask you to retake it. So it's something that can happen, even though technically it hasn't expired, because it's different from TOEFL that you're going to be taking like every 2 years. But depending on the purpose, or it's context oriented, really. I've seen that already. So applying for a certain position, right? So when did you take your exam? 6 years ago. So you took it like a long time ago. You should retake it. We're only going to accept your grade if you have taken within the past 2 years or something like that. So yeah.
So we don't have an official deadline, but the companies or the universities, they will like impose their own deadlines on that, right?
And then there's nothing you can do about that, right? So if you're really want to get into whatever you're applying for, you're going to have to retake it.
Yeah, I see. Well, if it's a job, I normally tell my students that normally if it's a job, the only thing is that people will like to interview you to maybe see if your level is still, fluent, if you can still communicate. And even though we took it like 5 years ago, so we still have to have this English interview, but maybe they would have to go through that anyway. Yeah,
it may happen.
And then when we talk about the differences, what can a B1 student do? What can a B2 student do? Why am I a B1? Why a B2? So how would you differentiate these levels?
I think that's something that can help, especially teachers that are not that experienced, or even students, for example, because you can find the Brazilian version of the Common European Framework on the internet. I mean, it has been translated.
The Brazilian one, I've never seen it.
Yeah, there's some reliable websites where you can find, for example, the translated version of the Common European Framework, some of the can-do statements. So, I mean, even if students are interested, they can go to these websites and they can read more. But I think that when you're reading, that may be the challenge, because when you're reading, there's a lot of overlapping between the levels. And it may get a little bit confusing for you to differ one level from the other because of the similarities. So something that I use as a strategy, or I used to use as a strategy when I was trying to gain a better understanding of the differences between the levels, was to focus on keywords. And I'll always look for keywords so then to help me see, okay, so this is B1, what about B2? So in terms of expectations, what really makes a difference in terms of B1? If I compare a B1 level student and a B2 level student. I would approach it from this perspective by trying to find difference in terms of keywords. And if you look, for example, at B1, normally you see things like, because it's important to mention something beforehand. When you look at B1 and B2, you're talking about the level when students start to become more independent, right? Independent users of the language. So they don't depend so much on their, let's say, on their interlocutor to carry out the conversation, which is something that is very clear. For example, if you look at level A1, which says that you can have a conversation, but then you depend heavily on your interlocutor to help you to speak more slowly, to use simpler words. And it's something that at B1 and B2 level, it's not present there. It's not there because then supposedly you have reached the level of proficiency that allows you to be more independent. And this is one of the keywords. So you can deal with situations that are more, let's say, unpredictable, which is something that in comparison with lower levels, supposedly students can't do, or they're going to struggle because they're going to be able to have conversations, but more focused on very familiar topics and things that are more predictable. It's more like the here and now. Unlike, for example, B1 and B2, that this unpredictability is going to be, now it's more present, but on the other hand, you can deal with it better in a more effective way. Then when you go from B1 to B2, something that makes a huge difference is it's in terms of flexibility. So you are more flexible when it comes to how you use the language. Not only more flexible in terms of how you express your ideas, but also in terms of the kind of language that you can understand and use. At B1, I would say that it's, even though you can do these things to a certain degree, you're still dealing with more concrete things. It's difficult for you, for example, to express more complex ideas, more abstract ideas, and to justify, for example, your answers and to provide reasons. And this is something that once you get into B2 level, you're already expected to do that.
And to hypothesize, to draw conclusions of things that are non-visual, for example. So exactly that, to infer. I just talked about it with some students the other day. I said it's just like the process of children learning. When they're little, they're very, as you said, the here and now, the concrete. And as we start developing, we start getting more, acquiring more of the world and being able to explore more and to experiment more and knowing how to deal in situations that are not common. That are not like in your daily life. So, yeah. And then in terms of flexibility, you mean it's maybe knowing how to use different words and expressions to convey different meanings or specific meanings.
Yes, you have more flexibility, for example, in terms of how you're going to express your ideas, which is something that it can be difficult for a B1 level learner, especially if it's something that, let's say, for example, that they're going to ask for advice or give advice. Okay, I would say, a more practical example. I would say that a B1 level learner, for example, would definitely resort to something like should, because that's the kind of language that they were introduced to in order to perform that function. But once you get to B2 level, so I mean, ideally, theoretically, you have expanded your repertoire of options to ask for advice and to give advice. So you're going to be performing the same function, but now you have more flexibility to use different words and different structures.
And that's why it's so important as speaking examiners and also as when you're correcting writing the avoiding repetition. Yeah, so is able to convey so and such meaning without repeating or hesitating.
Definitely. And but I'll add one more thing that makes a huge difference, or at least a significant difference, which is spontaneity. You can tell that at B2 level, it's easier for you. Earlier on, I made reference to dealing with unpredictable situations, right? If you are a lower level learner, if you're stepping to B1 or still at B1 level, it can be difficult for you to deal with unpredictable situations because you're still dealing with all. You can work really well with familiar situations like your routine, the place you work, your studies, because you are used to them. So it's not that hard for you to express, to talk to people, express your ideas, to write texts that are related to your area of, let's say, your area of expertise or areas you're familiar with. But then when you get it to B2 level, then you have this flexibility to deal with situations that are going to arise and maybe you're not expecting. Because of your, I'm going to use this word, your linguistic repertoire now. I would say it's more vast, right, than it used to be when you were at B1 level. So yeah, I think in a nutshell, the main differences between B1 and B2 would be the ones we've been discussing so far. And then we have C1 and C2, right?
Yeah. Would you like to go into that?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you because, for example, in terms of exam strategies, and many students who are preparing for C1, they get like really scared because they look at the text and they go like, oh my God, look at the length of the text that we have in C1 level. If you compare it to what it was in B2 level, it's a huge leap. So in terms of exam strategies, how do you think that would change?
I think it changes a lot. And this, the process of going from B2 to C1, it can be somewhat traumatic if students are not made aware of the challenge that they're going to have to face, along the way. Because, and in a way, the same thing happens when you're going from C1 to C2, because once you have reached C1 level of proficiency, you're like, okay, so what's next? I feel confident. I can express my ideas competently. I feel that I'm fluent. So, I mean, what is CP is going to, what CP is going to require from me that, I haven't achieved yet, right? But yeah, so back to your question, from B2 to C1. I think that one of the things that we need to consider is complexity. What do I mean by complexity? So, and this is something that I remember students complaining about all the time. They would express their ideas in one way, which is fine. You'll be able to get your message across. But then, since we're focusing on something that's more, not only more advanced, like academically speaking, but more advanced because, again, we go back to flexibility, right? You can express the same idea in different ways according to the person you're talking to, the situation you're in. So it's important for them to develop this flexibility. So what does that entail? Well, they're going to be exposed to more advanced structures. They're going to be exposed to more advanced lexes. And this is something that I remember like vividly students complaining about. Like, I'm not familiar with this word. This is a word that I'm never going to use. Or, why should I use that structure if I can express the same idea using a simpler one? And I think it takes time for them really, to sink in that since they are preparing for an advanced level exam, their language is going to have to complexify.
Not necessarily, but I understand what you mean. Not necessarily that they are going to bring this to real life, because this is something that we talked about. Not necessarily that we're going to talk like that to everyone we meet. But as you mentioned, if they're going for that, if they're going for that kind of exam, they have to widen their range of vocabulary in order to get to all of that flexibility. and be able to apply for the exam. And as you mentioned, read maybe something more sophisticated. But again, not that you're going to talk to your students in such a way, yeah, or using such words, but you need them if you want to succeed in a proficiency exam.
Yeah, yeah. In addition to that, I would say that maybe it can be rather challenging for them to see that not everything that they are exposed to on a more receptive level through text, for example, or listening, that they are expected to use all the new language and structures productively. Because when they start, yeah, I feel that when they start reading more complex texts, like the text at C1 level, they feel somewhat overwhelmed because they're like, wow, but there's a lot of words and structures that I don't know, that they're like unfamiliar to me. But it's and then that's when I stop and try to make them aware of the fact that it's not because it's, you know, everything that's new you are exposed, you're supposed to use it in your speaking or in your writing. You're going to have to pick and choose. You're going to have to be selective, because from this point on, something that also changes, if I'm not mistaken, is also the types of situations you are expected to interact with, right? For instance, more professional, academic, especially academic. I mean, there are so many universities nowadays that accept CAE as proof of your level of proficiency, because you can function in an academic context. If you can function in an academic context, it means that you have enough level of, I mean, your level of proficiency is enough for you to watch lessons, for example, from a university. And this is something that poses a challenge, because they're like, okay, but my purpose is not to study abroad or to go to a British university or an American university, so why should I bother learning all these new words and expressions? So then it's a question of purpose, and this is, I tell people that not everyone needs to reach C1 level, C1 or C2 level of proficiency, right? It's not something that you have to. It's a question of purpose.
Even if you're talking to teachers, because now you're very oriented, like you're working specifically with teachers. But when it comes to students, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I'm thinking more about students. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. It depends on their goals, on what they want. Yeah. On their objectives. Yeah.
I remember asking Debora when I used to work more with like regular students, when they would come to me and say, I want to take the CP. My question would be, why? Do you really need that? I mean,
it's fancy.
Have you thought it through? Is it something that, I mean, are you sure where you're going to get yourself into?
Have you seen how it works? Yeah. No,
don't need that.
No. I think that we as language teachers, we must have it, or I don't know. Well, that was like me talking to myself, you know, always. So I always wanted to excel at the things, like, so if I'm going to do this as a profession, and this is something I always told everyone, like, oh, why do you take so many exams? Guys, I graduated in biomedicine. What can prove that I can speak English well? If not the exams that I take, you know, I have to specialize somehow. I'm not going back to university right now, so I need to, you know, to get the work done somewhere else in another way. And so I think that for us teachers, this is very important because of that. You never know to which situation you will be exposed. So being prepared for that is key.
Yeah, definitely. And if you want to teach more advanced levels, I think that's a great idea for you to prepare yourself for an exam, or even if you don't take the exam itself, but I mean, reaching that level of proficiency, right? Because how are you expected to teach someone at C1 or C2 level if you don't feel that you are at that level yourself? I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
And we have something like a common sense that for you to teach a level, you must be at least 2 levels above that level. Isn't it something like that? Like for you to teach B1, you should be at least C1 or something like that?
I've heard that. Yeah, I think that as a rule of thumb,
Of course, not a general truth, but
sure.
yeah. Because you must feel comfortable.
Exactly. I remember, for example, that it took me. I took my CPE in 2007, and it took me, I think, 4 years until I really, like said to some, like I was able to summon the courage to say, okay, now I'm going to start preparing people. Because even though some people would come to me and ask, okay, can you help me prepare for the C2 proficiency? And I wouldn't feel ready for it, even though I had taken the exam, I had passed.
Taken?
I wouldn't feel ready for it.
I know what you mean.
It takes
I
some
think I
time
did it to
until.
Flavia. I don't know if Flavia is still here, but it was the case. I said, Flavia, you passed, so please teach me.
Sometimes you don't have much of a choice, right? Because you find someone who really wants to have classes, and then
Yeah.
you feel, okay, right, so I can help you.
And for the people who really want it, it's hard to find someone who actually got through the process and is able to, to guide them through that. It's not something that you find, oh, well, okay, now with the online teaching, everything is much easier. We have like no boundaries anymore, but in the old days when we had to have face-to-face lessons, it was much harder, especially that we are in a small city.
Yeah. And it wasn't, yes, definitely, it wasn't easy to find someone who could help you with. I mean, depending on the exam you're preparing for, the level you're trying to achieve, it wasn't easy to find someone to help you.
Yeah.
Now it's easier, definitely, but back in the day, oh God, it was so hard.
And combining both, like the language knowledge and the didactics and the teaching skills is something special as well. So it's not because like you're a native speaker and you know lots of different words and structure that you teach well. This is something else as well.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I met like native speaker teachers that they started preparing students for the C1 exam, and they really struggled. Like they really struggled. And I mean, of course, you may argue, but isn't English their first language? But it's not just a question of language. It's a question of strategy. It's a question of technique. It's a question of knowing the exam and everything that it involves. So I mean, just because you are a native, I mean, doesn't make you a good exam prep teacher. Obviously not.
Just what we talked about before. And now, Sergio, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I think we have 5 minutes left.
5 left?
Is it?
Already?
Have a look at it. I guess.
Yes. Yes,
Is
we
it?
have 5 minutes
Yeah.
left. That's right.
Maybe we should focus on some questions that you received. Would you like to select some of the questions? I think I have them here in my computer.
I think we also got some questions here. I'm really bad at keeping an eye,
Oh, me too.
at multitasking, talking.
Well,
But
me
I have
too.
some questions here. We have a question from Felipe. Felipe asks, people who get a grade A on the C1 advanced exam should also take the C2 proficiency?
I guess that's what we talked about, right? Like you do have a statement in your certificate saying that you are a C2
Right, C2
level.
level.
But if you really want to have, I don't know, another certificate, but what do you think? I wouldn't say it's really necessary.
I don't know if that's the reason why Philippe asked that question, but when you look at schools looking for teachers, for example, they're looking for teachers who have a C2 level of proficiency, but they don't really specify whether it should be a CP or CE. As long as you have C2 level of proficiency, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you have stated in your certificate that you are so and such level, it doesn't necessarily have to be that certain certificate, I'd say, because otherwise Cambridge wouldn't take the trouble of doing it, right?
Yes, yeah. Even you can take IELTS and you can reach C2 level.
No, but I think the question was if I do have written my exam that I am a C2 level, do I need to take CPD? Yeah.
Oh no, okay, yeah. Not really.
Being the exam a CAE, a C1 advanced.
Yeah. We took the CAE.
And then we had another question. We have another question here from Alex. Do you guys have any particular difficulty, hard experience in any of the abilities? Well, I have to tell you, Alex, that for me, when I took my C2, my proficiency, the hardest part was definitely writing. It was one of my lowest score. It was my lowest score actually. I got like very well in reading and listening and speaking, but writing was a bit borderline because I had to write a proposal. And that was something that I never actually enjoyed writing much. So I always, did other things and wrote other things, but then I had to get down and write a proposal. That took me most of my time. And yeah, that was one of the hardest parts for me. What about you, Serge? Did you face any?
I believe it was writing, because it was something that I had to develop it like years later after I took the exam. Then I felt that okay, if I am to teach the C2 level of proficiency, then I need to develop my writing skills. But by the time I took the exam, there were many things that I wasn't really good at. Punctuation was one of them. Coincidentally, tonight.
I see so many students that have punctuation issues.
Yeah, like definitely. Also, how to write an effective paragraph.
I guess this is because our own writing in Portuguese. We write very
Maybe
little.
it has to do with that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I always tell my students that because we don't have the habit of writing even in Portuguese. So when it gets to English, you're adding, you're adding a bonus difficulty to the challenge. So yeah, I think that'd be it.
So it's definitely a skill that I have to carry on working on. I mean, after the exam, but by the time I took it, really, I really
and now you work
struggled.
a lot with writing. Yeah, you work a lot with writing.
Like every week, I have I give feedback on like 30 or 40 essays.
Okay. All right. Let me see. We have other questions. I remember a student asked, apart from course books, is reading unabridged books and listening to BBC or TED Talks a clever idea? I'd say that every contact you have is valid, right? Every contact you have with the language is valid. It will help you, as we mentioned, build up your repertoire of language and, lexis structure. So that I think you'd say the same, right?
Sure. Is this question about any exam in particular, or it's like a general question?
It's about apart from course books. So I guess it would be like any exam.
Okay. All right.
Would you specify? Would you direct that to any specific exam?
Yeah, this is since I work predominantly with C1 and C2, I get this question in relation to these two exams, because they say that, okay, I've been preparing for the C2 Advanced, and what kind of texts can I read that are going to help me expose to C2 level language, or what kind of stuff can I listen to or can I watch that I'm going to, because it's a question of you don't have all the time in the world. So if you have some time, what kind of stuff can you expose yourself to and make sure that it's going to help you develop your language at C2 level? So I think, you have to, if that's the case, you need to be more selective. As much as I love watching Friends, for example, I don't think that if you keep watching Friends, it's going to have like a significant impact on your C2 level English.
And which one would you choose? Which one would you choose, or which one would you point out? Like, oh, this one's a good one.
The Big Bang Theory, some people find it annoying, but I love watching it for the sake of language. N with an E is also another one that if you watch it, you're going to find like a tsunami of words and expressions that are frequently tested at C2 level. And also the books you read, right? So, I mean, you have to be kind of selective because, of course, reading is amazing. And if you reading extensively can do wonders but for your language development. But I think that if your purpose is to expose yourself to more high-level English, then you have to choose your books carefully.
Are there any guidelines we can use to select them?
Normally, my reference is the authors. I know that there are some authors, for example, that they use language in a way that it's like I'll be playing safe. If I read a book by that author, I know that I'm going to get exposed to high-level language. And podcasts too. I love listening to podcasts, but there are podcasts that I listen to for fun, and others that I listen to for the sake of my language development, because I know that throughout the podcast they're going to be using like lots of new words and expressions.
Mm-hmm. And do you write these words down? I'm just checking the questions that we have. Do you write them down like you're listening and you come across a word? Do you go there and write it down to check it later?
I try to be selective because there's so many new words, and
this one I want to know.
There will always be new words and new structures, so I try to be selective. So one of the questions I use as a kind of a guideline is, do I intend to use this word? Is it something that I'm
good one.
Try to use more productive? If the answer is yes, then I make sure that I take notes, I do some research, and then immediately I try to go from my receptive to my productive vocabulary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And switch.
Yeah.
Okay. Another person asked, what to do when you have skills in different levels? And this is something that we just talked about, how different was my writing score, my speaking score. I think that you're always going to have strongest skills and weaker skills. This is part of life. But I think that the way I see it, you should at least level them to the level of the exam you're taking, so as not to fail any of them,
Yeah, yes. It frequently happens, doesn't it? When people, they're preparing for exams and then they come to realize that, oh, my reading skills are not as good as my listening skills, or vice versa. And then if you're taking a course and you have a tutor, the tutor is going to tell you, what you should focus more on, should work on. But yeah, and it doesn't mean, Debora, I don't know if you agree, but it doesn't mean you may decide to focus more on one skill that you consider as a weakness in order to improve it. But chances are that you're going to be better at some things and not as good as other things. I think it's natural.
Totally. I was going to say that it's natural. Yeah, but as I told you, maybe just develop it so as not to fail, like to have a huge discrepancy, if that's how you say it, but a huge difference between one and another. So I'm like amazing at speaking, but I'm terrible at writing. So then you have a huge impact in your score. So if you can maybe bring this writing a little more close, or a little closer to your speaking, just so you can still have a good grade at the end of the day, when you get your score.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's important to strike a balance, right? So then there's like
a discrepancy. That it's hard. It's even hard to have such discrepancy, because if you can speak so well, how can you write, just so loudly, let's say, probably. Yeah, it doesn't. I don't think it's quite possible to be such extremes.
Yeah, doesn't happen.
Just imagining. Very often, right?
Not very often.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think we have time for one more question. Alex is asking again. What would you guys say are the 3 most crucial things for people to get to C2? Say timing, fluency, emotional control. Oh, emotional control is key, as always, for all of them, right? B2, C1.
You shouldn't underestimate the psychological factor, because it does play a role. Yes.
But I have to tell you that for C2, it was really, it was overwhelming, because like in all B2 and C1, I finished the papers, and I still had some spare time, so as to think and leave the room. But for C2, like the guy was almost taking the leaf out of my hands, like, okay, time's up, and I was like, I'm just about to finish. Please let me shade in.
Yes.
I finished in the nick of time every single paper. So yeah.
I feel the same. You never have enough time. It's
we get it all done. We do get it all done. Yeah. I'm not the kind of person who keeps coming back and making sure, let me see if I got it right or not. But yeah. Oh, we have 23 seconds now.
Yeah. No, when it comes to Cambridge exams, time is always against us. Always.
Okay, Sergio. So I have 10 seconds to thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's been a pleasure. So
My
it was a
pleasure.
huge pleasure to talk to you. And well, we'll see you around. Thank you very